What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. So, today's episode is going to be a conversation with my blood sugar stabilization bestie, Marjan. And we're going to be talking about why it's so important to stabilize those blood sugar levels throughout the day. So, maybe why it's important to eat at least protein, healthy fat, and fiber at most meals. We're probably going to touch on eating more frequently and how that's related to more energy and better moods. But before we delve into all of that, let me just remind you of a few things. So, first and foremost, the last day to be able to get your hands on the period nutrition plan and the bundle is going to be June 30th. So if you have been looking to learn from me on demand and really implement the practice of cycle syncing and eating your way to a better period and balanced hormones and everything in between, I'm going to leave that link down in the show notes for you. I would so appreciate if you got your hands on it now, because the sooner you get your hands on it, the sooner you can implement. Number two, I have also linked all of Marjan's information down below for you as well. So if you do have a question about working with her or learning more from her, feel free to reach out. Instagram is definitely the place where she says go and hang out with her, but also shooting her an email if need be. Maybe following her on TikTok and getting in touch would be awesome. Last but certainly not least, I want to remind you, when you're listening to this podcast, take what you need, leave what you don't. And with that, let's get into today's episode. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking with my blood sugar bestie, and we're going to be talking all about blood sugar stabilization, because after our first time doing this interview, I made the executive decision that we need to standardize before we optimize, and blood sugar stabilization is a standard thing we have to do. So, blood sugar bestie, would you love to take it away and introduce yourself?
Hi, period bestie. I love that we're doing this. Again, we are two fellow Pisces entrepreneur gals, and we are super like-minded. So I'm so glad to be here right now. I am Marjan, and I currently live and work in Montreal, Canada. And I am a holistic nutritionist and certified nutritional practitioner. And I am obsessed with all things to do with blood sugar, and I can't wait to get into it.
I am so excited because honestly, you know, those people who are just kind of like, let me set the record straight. I feel like both of us, because we're February Pisces, like we're so different than everybody else. So if you don't mind, could you just set the record straight and tell us what blood sugar stabilization is and why should we care? Like, what is the big deal about it?
Yeah, that is exactly what I love talking about, because whenever I bring up blood sugar, especially with people around our age category, 20s to 30s, where people think that, oh, that's not for me, because that's something to do with people who are quote unquote overweight. Or sometimes people will say, oh, my grandfather has diabetes, so that only he has to worry about his blood sugar levels. But the reality is, all of us need to be looking at our blood sugar levels, because it is literally where our energy levels come from during the day. And if you've eaten food in the last 3 or 4 hours, which I'm assuming a lot of us have, and if you are a human being listening to this podcast right now, then you do have a blood sugar balancing mechanism in your body that's working. And we want to learn how to stabilize that so that we don't have so many ups and downs in energy levels, but we have stable energy levels. So that's the thing that I really want to focus on.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that almost everyone listening to this podcast has probably had that 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. crash, right? And we all think it's normal, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I feel like we've all felt that.
And nobody can see me right now, but I'm nodding as you're
Yeah.
saying, yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing, right? It's that normal or common doesn't have to be normal. It is something that is so common. A lot of us experience it. And I know you see a lot of things in your practice as well, too, that are maybe super common because everybody experiences it and we normalize those things, but it's not super normal. And there are things we can do about it. That's the great thing about it.
louder for the people in the back, but also, okay, so how is this really relevant to our hormonal health? Because I think that there's this gap that we're so used to hormonal health really only having to do with like just your hormones. But for me with blood sugar, I'm like, it's baseline for optimal health altogether, just health altogether. But specific to hormone health, how does this help us out?
So with hormone health, when it comes to hormones, a lot of us, again, this comes back to the whole, like when I ask about what is blood sugar and people give these vague answers, I find it's the same with hormonal health, or when people say I have hormonal imbalances. What does that really mean? And
Mhm.
a lot of times we don't think about food in that sense, but the science behind all of this is that food literally breaks down into nutrients and it enters our cells and actually helps to produce hormones. So when your doctor or healthcare provider lets you know that your hormones are imbalanced, it's actually an indication that we're not getting the right nutrients to go into those cells to actually produce the right level of hormones. And so how that relates to blood sugar balance and eating the right nutrients for blood sugar is just like you had mentioned in the beginning, that blood sugar is like that stable foundation. And I'm going to get into a little bit more details about what blood sugar is actually supposed to look like. And that foundation is needed to build on the rest of it. So if you're thinking about, for example, like building something, constructing something, you need to have that solid foundation. And blood sugar is the thing that you want to build on, because when you think about blood sugar, if you think about those ups and downs,
Mhm.
how crappy of a foundation is that, right? For your hormones to deal with when your blood sugar is going in spikes all the time. So it is literally the foundation that we need to build on for our hormonal health.
I love that. Okay, so let's get a little bit more micro. What does this process of like balancing our blood sugar really look like? Let's get into those like highs and lows, because I remember the training that we did together last year, I think it was, where you were just like, yep, I'll teach the girls. So what does this actually like look like, or how does it work?
Okay, I'm going to paint a picture. Where are my visual learners at? You could close your eyes. If you're driving, don't close your eyes, but just try to imagine this. If you have my blood sugar guide ebook, which we'll talk about at the end, all of these images are in there. So imagine eating a meal. Most of the food that we eat breaks down into sugar. And that's actually normal because we need sugar or glucose to enter our cells and actually give us energy. That's what we want. That's why we eat food, right? And so this is the thing that always gets me when I have clients that say, I have low energy, but I'm eating so well. You're not eating that well if your energy levels aren't great, because the whole point of human beings eating food is to get energy. So imagine you're having a meal, it goes into your system, it breaks down into sugar mostly. Not everything breaks down into sugar. We're going to get into more specifics later on, but pretty much everything breaks down into sugar. It enters our bloodstream and that enters our cells and it gives us energy. So if you picture that on a graph, what that looks like is that it kind of goes up a little bit on the graph. It gives us a little bit of energy and then it comes slowly back down. Hopefully it comes slowly back down and doesn't come crashing down. And then we feel hungry again and we're going to eat another meal and that's going to slowly roll up. So if you picture like a nice small roller coaster, not those big crazy roller coasters, just the small one, that's the normal process of how it's supposed to go. And that's how we as human beings obtain energy. Where we have a problem is our lovely North American diets, or just the types of foods that we tend to gravitate towards are extremely carbohydrate dense. They're the bagels and breads and the grab a coffee at Starbucks or Tim Hortons quickly. Everything is on the go, quick, quick, quick. And we're not actually paying attention to having a proper meal. So what that actually looks like instead of that slow curve is that with that typical North American style breakfast, what's going to happen is we're going to get a ton of energy at one time, which sounds great. But guess what? What goes up must come down, right? And so if you think back to the last time that you had a sugar crash, we've all had it. So I'll raise my hand. The last time, you're nodding as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The last time that you had a sugar crash, I always get clients to visualize this or picture that time. What were some of the feelings that came up? Typically, clients say crashes in energy, right? You feel that crash, like you want to take a nap. You might feel a little bit headachy, a migraine may be coming on. You might tend to get a little bit more sugar cravings. You want more sweets. And so everybody can attest to a time where they felt that downward spiral, and it's not a pleasant feeling. I know you're nodding your head right now. I am unpleasantly remembering times where I have felt like this too. Mm-hmm. But if you think about, again, our North American diets, this up and down is actually way more normal than we think. And we can all start to actually pay attention for ourselves to those symptoms. If we're feeling low energy or crashes in energy all the time, if we're feeling moody, or, that level of frustration you get when you're on the downward spiral of a blood sugar crash, it just feels like every little thing just ticks you off. That feeling, that might be an indication that you're having these ups and downs in blood sugar. Headaches and migraines all the time, that also might be an indication that this downward spiral is happening too many times a day. So those are some things to look for. And that's kind of the up and down that I hope that you can all visualize. Did you visualize it? Can you?
So
are you following me here?
I'm following you, but I actually have a really perfect visual for people to think of. So I want you guys to think about, like, I don't know if you guys have this in Canada. I'm sure you do at like your water parks where you have like the lazy river. If you go to a water park, I feel like that's kind of how like the balance of blood sugar should be, but most of us probably experience those peaks and valleys that a mountain might have. So I want you to think about like lazy river energy, where it's like it has those curves, it has those ebbs and flows, but they're very soft and gentle. Whereas when your blood sugar isn't balanced, we have those peaks and valleys of a mountain. Is that like a good visual?
Okay. That is amazing. I actually love that. I'm going to use that.
You can have it. It's yours. It's yours.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay. So I would love, like, just kind of hearing you talk about this. I would love to hear you kind of speak into some of the benefits of blood sugar balance for menstrual health specifically, because listen, I follow you on TikTok, like I'm like so bad at like content right now, but it's like, I try to keep up with like people. I'm like, oh, I'm learning from you. And you speak to some of the benefits of, better periods and hormonal health as it relates to balancing your blood sugar. So give us like, just like a few of those benefits so people realize why and how this is important.
So thank you, fellow TikToker, fellow TikTok follower. I follow you as well too, loving your content. One of the things, well, like we just talked about, that blood sugar is that foundation that we need for our hormones. So when we think about hormonal health, we want to think about not just this abstract thing of like, oh yeah, I have a hormonal imbalance. We don't even know what the heck that means. We want to actually look at, okay, that's an indication that we're probably not getting the right nutrients to build that foundation. So when we go back to that lazy river analogy, you don't want to be in that roller coaster of the spike and the drop, right? So one of the things that we want to do actually in order to not create that huge spike and that crash is eat more in a way that balances that out for the long term. So some of the nutrients that I mentioned in my blood sugar guide is proteins and fats. A lot of us are lacking in proteins and fats, and that is not because there is a lack of those things in this world. It's because we actually, for some weird reason, don't think that our bodies need that. But for our blood sugar balance to actually be in that lazy river kind of analogy way, we need to have those main components. And the reason is that both of those things do not break down into sugar. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at that graph and you're looking at it spiking up really high, that's a representation of all of the carbohydrates and the sugar on that plate, which again, it's normal to have a certain amount of sugar because that's where we get our energy from. But with that protein and that fat on the plate, it's actually displacing the amount of carbohydrates because they do not break down into sugar. So if it doesn't break down into sugar, then it's not spiking up so high, right? It's just creating a nice natural curve, which again is the representation of energy levels. So how this all pertains to hormonal health, again, is that it's really, really easy for us to track blood sugar balance. And it's not as easy to notice some of the hormonal shifts. So something that you might want to start with is, if you're new to all of this, is check in with yourself. What are some things that you are potentially experiencing throughout the month? Low energy levels all the time, crashes in energy, like we talked about in the beginning, that 3 o'clock crash is not entirely normal. If you're experiencing that all of the time, then you might want to look at your blood sugar levels. If you are experiencing mood swings, if you're experiencing migraines all the time, we talked about this at the beginning too, but migraines are something that happens during that downward part of the crash, right, that we talked about. But especially for people who are of menstruating age, they tend to experience those migraines at a heightened level right before their menstrual phase, so right before their bleed. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I know I personally have experienced that symptom. No, you haven't?
No. And
you're an anomaly in this world. What?
Well, so I do a lot of research about menstrual migraines specifically. And what I've noticed is when your blood sugar levels are not stable or balanced, and when your nervous system is super shot because you're not eating enough or you're taking on too much, your body responds in certain ways. And so for me, my response, if anytime I'm like stressed out or anxious, is just no food in general. It's very toxic. Okay. I'm not going to lie. I lose my appetite. Yeah. But I've also noticed that's kind of not only linked to a neurological response of my brain being like fight or flight, you're not eating, but some people's brains are linked to a neurological response that says trigger discomfort to sit you down. I don't know why, but it just like my body neurologically responds different. So while I haven't experienced that, like, I don't think I've ever had a migraine.
Honestly, oh my gosh, who are you even?
Well, but that's because I feel like my body responds in a weird way to most things. Like compared to most people, I'm like, like if I'm like emotional, my body's like, don't eat instead of like binge eat, So I think everybody has like their thing, but I love learning about migraines and specifically menstrual ones because they make a lot more sense to me than any other type of migraine. Like I did some research and they were like, there's like 6 different types of migraines. And I'm like, huh?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But those ones that happen right before our bleed typically can be related to drops in blood sugar levels. So again, when we're picturing that spike and then that crash happening, and when you picture the fact that your hormonal systems are on this foundation of a blood sugar foundation. I don't know how else to explain it. But again, if you're looking at a building, you're constructing a building, if your hormonal system is on top of this foundation, so your foundation is this spike and crash all day, what do you think is going to happen when your hormones are fluctuating right around the time of your bleed? It's probably going to get worse, and you're probably going to experience heightened symptoms, including hormonal migraines or including that really intense migraine. For me, it used to come on literally the day before my bleed, and I didn't notice myself until my partner recognized it one time and said, I know your period is coming tomorrow because you always get this migraine. And so that was my clue that my body is communicating something to me. Everything that we've talked about so far are all just communications from your body, right? So those crashes and energy, that's just a communication. It's not anything to freak out about. Those mood swings, those are all just a communication. Your body's telling you that, hey, I'm not getting enough of what I need for that foundation in order for this building to be constructed in a way that's not going to be the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No, like, it's so interesting that you say that, because I'm in the middle of writing my book right now, and the concept is redefining body language, right? So taking all of those signs and symptoms that our body is actually giving us, like the language of our body, our hormones, right? That we don't understand, and saying, this symptom is actually meaning this. This is body language, not your posture, not necessarily like how you deliver information, but like, oh, you're giving away all the goods.
I am so happy that you're writing about this, because I think sometimes we get so frustrated, especially us menstruating women are sometimes so frustrated with some of these things that our body does. And it's so annoying sometimes, right? Because I've been there. But once you start understanding that, hey, my body's actually just communicating, just like how any of us communicate verbally. And all I have to do is start paying attention and start feeding my body with what it's asking for. And those things will level out. I think that in our society, we often have the concept of quote unquote eating healthy means somehow eating less food, right? Like we get this weird idea that the less food that you eat, the quote unquote healthier you are. And I totally believe that it's the opposite, because our symptoms are communicating to us that, hey, I actually need more.
Yeah. And this is why we're besties. And this is why we're
exactly.
besties.
We're on the same wavelength, girl.
Always on the same wavelength. And, we've talked about some of the benefits of stabilizing blood sugar levels and really balancing it, such as more energy or better moods, alleviating menstrual migraines, really alleviating brain fog altogether. I notice that like when I eat enough, right? Like I can think better. But what I would love for you to do right now is kind of share what it looks like to work with you, whether someone grabs, the current ebook that is out, or maybe the upcoming one. This is a moment where I really want you to kind of like share more about your process and what that could look like for someone.
Yeah. So I work virtually with people from all around the world. I do one-on-one coaching in an 8-week program, and 8 weeks really means 8 weeks. We work together for 1-hour sessions every single week. And we deep dive into all of these symptoms or communications that are coming up for your body right now, to help to get to the root of why they're happening. Because if we can understand why something is happening and we can feed it with the right things, then we can alleviate that need for that communication, right? And so I love that part of my job, working with you to just kind of get it all figured out so that you can learn how to listen to your body for the long term, which is just an amazing and empowering feeling for me to know that others are feeling that way as well too. If that's not something that people want to invest in right now, I also have a blood sugar guide ebook. I've mentioned it a couple of times because There is a lot of diagrams and drawings in there that are super helpful for all of us visual learners out there who want to actually see how blood sugar actually works inside of your body, what nutrients you need to start adding in. And we are talking about adding in nutrients. We're not talking about removing nutrients. I think, again, a lot of times people think, oh, blood sugar balance is like, I don't have the willpower to cut carbs and all of this stuff. We are not talking about that in the Blood Sugar Guide ebook. We are talking about adding in the right nutrients your body needs to actually stabilize this for the long term so that you can have way better energy levels and way better mood, mental focus, and hopefully help to eliminate those hormonal migraines. If you're like me, if they're coming on right before your bleed, that's for you. And like you mentioned, I am in the process of writing a migraine specific ebook as well too. So that will be coming out shortly.
I'm so excited. Okay. With that being said, where can everyone find you on the interwebs? Because we know I got to plug my friends.
Oh yeah, totally. And we follow each other already, so that's great. I'm on Instagram at Healthy by Marjan and on TikTok now as well too. I'm venturing into the TikTok world, also at Healthy by Marjan over there. I actually do have a discount code for my Blood Sugar Guide ebook on TikTok. So if you are following me on TikTok, check out the link in my bio for 10% off. And my website. I'm like, what else is there? How else can you connect with me? There's so many ways. And my website at Healthy by Marjan as well.
My final question for you is, what is one thing you do daily to really optimize your flow? Because you are on Optimize Your Flow. So naturally.
Yes. Can I be super nerdy and bring it back to blood sugar? Do you want me to bring it back to blood sugar?
You can do whatever you want. You can.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in two things. Okay. Number one is that I always try to start my day with a protein source. I meant to say this in the beginning, but that will just set that tone for that lazy river or the roller coaster we were talking about, right? When you start your day with something that doesn't break down into sugar, then it doesn't create that huge spike. So you want to add some sort of protein source, whether that is a good quality protein powder or eggs, or I don't know. So I think me and you are the same way. We sometimes eat our leftover dinner for breakfast. Are you that person? Yeah, you are, right?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. I thought so. The other thing that I do is I try to go outside every single day to breathe fresh air, which we as human beings in this day and age, we do not breathe enough fresh air. And I sound like the biggest holistic hippie out there, but it's true. We don't breathe enough fresh air, and we also don't see enough actual daylight. We see a lot of this type of light from our phones and our computers and the lights in our homes, but we do not see natural daylight, which actually helps to regulate our circadian rhythms, which you probably know a lot about. And in a roundabout way also helps to support our hormonal levels too. So that's something that I try to do every single day. I'm known as like the walking lady around here. I'm the only one walking by myself without a pet. It's the weirdest thing.
I love that. So sciencey one. And was that kind of like your more like chill one too?
Yes. Slowing things down is huge for me. I feel like you are the same way.
Oh yeah. Like I've gotten to that point in my life where it is so cyclical and so like ebb and flow. Like I think the pace of my life now, which is so weird to say, is that lazy river as opposed to like the peaks and valleys. And maybe it's like a late 20 something, like, you know, I'm 28. So maybe it's because I'm in my late 20s, but I'm not in this hurry to peak and valley. Like I don't, I'm really okay if I never peak, you know, and I want to avoid the valley. Like, you know, that's just kind of how I am. But I want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us and really just like educating us all about blood sugar. Is there anything else you want to leave the girls with?
That was amazing. And I'm so happy to be here. Please connect with me on Instagram or TikTok or however you want to connect with me. I love talking about this stuff. So it's never a bother. Please connect with me anytime.
Love you. Oh my
Love
goodness.
you.
We can all agree that that episode was so power packed and informative. And if you know me, you know that I like to teach the one method, which stands for organize your meals, nurture your adrenals, and execute daily. And if you're kind of like Barry, I haven't heard you say that in a while. Don't worry, we'll recap it later on this year on the podcast. But one of the most important things we talk about is organizing your meals. Why? Because it stabilizes your blood sugar levels. So if you love this conversation and you definitely want to learn more about blood sugar stabilization, check the show notes for all the information. And if you really like the episode, I would so appreciate if you left a 5-star rating and review of the podcast. And as always, I'm sending you big love and flowy vibes. Actually, optimal vibes. I'll talk to you soon.